Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. You can keep your cameras on, turn them off, whatever you prefer. We do suggest you keep your mics off unless you're asking a question or speaking to the group, just for some sort of quick housekeeping. My name is Megan Hillman. I am the program manager at NCPH, the National Council on Public History. We periodically do some sort of informal social events around a given topic, just to give an opportunity for members and non-members alike to kind of get together, ask questions, learn together. It's my pleasure and joy always to join our new professional and student committee on these public history hangouts. Tonight, your new professional and student committee host is Michael Yee. Michael, I hope you will introduce yourself, say a few words.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'd like to, welcome you on behalf of the new professional and student committee. So I was pleased to serve. I'd like to point out that one of our co-chairs, Brian Whetstone, is in the window. I've faded to the speaker view. So, and I thank him and Mary Kate for their leadership with this committee. What I wanted to do while we're letting a few people also come on in, if you could put into the chat, I just am curious about, well, where are you coming in from, but also in the same chat, give us some feedback on how you heard about this event. This will be helpful as we're, deciding where and how is best to publicize future events. I think these types of virtual activities for this type of, organization is wonderful, but we also want to highlight the annual meeting as well. With that, Megan, do you want to talk really quickly about the conference, and then I'll jump back in?
Sure, just really quickly. So we are going to be meeting live in person for the first time since 2019, next month in Atlanta, Georgia. Registration is still open until the end of March 29th, in case you're interested. I will go ahead and drop a link in the chat to the sort of conference main page so that you can peek around, especially if you're in the Southeast area. There's still time to join us. We have a plentiful abundance of new professional and student events, networking events, social events, free plenary events, all sorts of things that are great for folks who are kind of kicking things off in the public history space, and for people who have joined us for a really long time. So I know I'll see a lot of you there, and hope to see a few more. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll kick things off, but I did want to share. So for the new professional student committee, we're here for the members, whether you are a veteran or a newer member. And so I was pleased to join. I am myself a new professional, having earned my master's in just 2020, but I had long been involved with public history, being historian educator at the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum, teaching at Cal State San Marcos, and then teaching an Asian American history class this coming fall at Miramar College here in San Diego. So I'm really, glad to be just starting off from my role. I want to encourage, if you are a new professional or a student, to really participate with us as a committee, and use all this accumulated knowledge that this group has. I'm really happy to then introduce our speakers who will be talking about the NCPH History at Work blog. And so I'll start off first with, Heidi Aronson is an assistant professor at the Sam Fox School of Design in Washington University in St. Louis, and assistant vice provost for academic assessment and the lead editor, also lead editor, History at Work blog. Kolk is a cultural historian who began as a visual artist and poet, and she is very attentive to issues of race and urban identity, disputes over public history and space, and wrote a book, Taking Possession, The Politics of Memory in the St. Louis Town, University of Massachusetts in 2019. She also has another co-edited book, Material World of Modern Segregation in St. Louis in the Long Era of Ferguson, 2022. She's also the lead co-editor or co-lead investigator for Beauty and Enormous Bleakness that explores American architecture's relationship to issues and immigration, exclusion, and cultural identity in the 20th century. Our other speaker is Richard Anderson. He is an assistant professor of practice at Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He teaches undergraduate courses in public history and US history. He has served in roles at Public Programming and Exhibitions Manager and Mellon ACLS Public Fellow for Humanities Action Lab at Rutgers University, Newark. And he has been involved with the NCPH blog, History at Work, since 2012 in many roles, serving on many committees, as well as a program committee for this annual meeting. He's also writing a book, Machine Politics, How Richard J. Daley and Chicago's Democratic Machine Remade American Liberalism. So we'll do a virtual or a welcome for Richard and Heidi as they talk about history at work and how it can advance your career. So I'll take it over, Richard and Heidi.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everybody. It's nice to see you all here, and it's nice to have an opportunity to chat about the blog. This is so informal that Heidi and I literally didn't do any discussion about like who was going to talk first or anything like that. But we're family on the blog, so I think do you want me to just kind of give like I can start with the overview, Heidi, since I'm already unmuted. I guess so. The History at Work blog is the sort of the house organ of NCPH. We look at the blog as a site for practitioners, NCPH members, people in the NCPH family, people like me who need to renew their membership in the next couple I got my eye on that, Megan. It's a site for practitioners and people in the NCPH kind of family to have conversations with each other about the field, about the things we're doing. That it's a forum to kind of raise thorny questions we're having, to share things that went well and kind of challenges that we're having, and to think through them as a community of practitioners. It's also a platform for NCPH members to communicate with each other, and for the NCPH to communicate with members about big things that are coming up. Everybody gets emails. That's how some of you are on the call tonight, but particularly for example, in advance of the annual meeting, folks who are going to be leading working groups, for example, or doing some type of special event, will often publish blog posts sort of describing what they're doing and sort of trying to kind of get folks thinking in advance of the annual meeting. The blog serves all of those functions. It's a place where you can kind of have an announcement that's larger than just an email, but to kind of provide some backstory. This is why we're bringing people together for the working group. If you're interested, make sure you join us in Atlanta, etc., that sort of thing. Part of the blog being a platform for members to talk to each other and a place for us to highlight the work we're doing and to wrestle with kind of tough questions that we're facing or think through kind of evolving challenges in the field. Another part of that is actually giving people opportunities to publish in the field and about the field. We take seriously efforts to keep a diverse and changing group of contributors being published in the blog. We'll say no to things. We will, we don't, take anything that comes over the transom. But as Heidi and I will talk about, we try to find a way to say yes, because we take seriously our commitment to supporting practitioners who want to have a byline, who want to get published, who want to have the experience of working with an editorial team and moving a post from a pitch to a published piece. And we want new contributors, new voices, new ideas. One of the ways I came into the field and started to make connections as a graduate student was contributing to History at Work. And 10 or 11 years later, you know, I'm still here in a different role, but I've made a lot of kind of rich connections by publishing in History at Work, and by having a friendly but, like, you know, constructively critical kind of forum to work through things I was thinking about in regard to public history. There's a lot more to say, but that is sort of how the NCPH and the History at Work editorial team thinks about the purpose for the blog and what we try to do with it.
All right, so I'll pick it up from there. First of all, just to say I'm the newest member of the editorial team, so I'm way less knowledgeable about the long history of NCPH and its publications than Richard, but I will attempt to embellish upon what he's just said, adding a few things. So we publish something like 70 to 75 posts a year, approximately. And another important feature of the posts, or a function, I should say, of the posts, to add to Richard's little list, is that they serve as a repository, a record of conversations that have taken place on key issues. And that means they sometimes find their way into classrooms where they, you know, might be assigned as, you know, in a little cluster of readings on a related subject. And, you know, as snapshots of different perspectives on some of the issues that that Richard was gesturing at. So some of the common kinds of posts that we might name as sort of broad, these are not restrictive categories by any means. We certainly don't require a pitch to fit into one of these, but loosely speaking, in addition to the thorny issues kind of category that Richard was alluding to, we see posts that feature cool new projects, new tools, digital humanities or public history kinds of tools, archival projects, collaborative initiatives with universities or in the community. And also, I guess this was kind of, you know, alluded to earlier, but the idea of a sort of conceptual or practical challenge that has come up for a given group of collaborators who they want to think more about it in relationship to broader trends in the field of public history. So some of those are you know, sort of loosely speaking, the family of types of posts that we have tended to see. And then more recently, I guess I should mention one other. More recently, there have been quite a lot of posts about the development challenges within the profession, and you know, issues related to workplace and the conditions of work in the field and so on. So it's pretty wide ranging in terms of content areas and types of posts. What they all have in common, I think, is they have a strong central idea or small set of ideas that they're communicating that they do fairly straightforwardly, with the main idea up front, sort of stated, you know, in a fashion that makes it easy then to sort of identify the driving argument, and, you know, often supplying examples from the real world experiences of the writer, but you know, with targeted purpose, right? Not an exhaustive account of a whole project or all the twists and turns and challenges, but a kind of select few instructive and revealing tidbits that correspond to the main idea in some way. All right, so I'll pause there. That was a lot of sentences. Richard, what do you want to add to that? And then maybe we can start getting to some of the practical matters of pitching and so on.
I can answer the question that Nikki asked about. I mean, we'll talk about kind of preferred themes and tips for publishing, but to this question of whether or not publishing at History at Work has been a pipeline for getting published in the Public Historian or other scholarly journals. I don't really see a direct pipeline between the two. They're different types of writing that, you know, serve different functions. And if anything, I think what can be really valuable about History at Work is learning to work a different kind of writing muscle, so to speak, writing not for the in the style of a scholarly journal like TPH or something similar, but writing in a more direct, kind of concise, punchy way, as Heidi indicated. And actually, posts that come to us written in a scholarly journal style often need to be reworked significantly, because both the language and the kind of the scale of the argument are usually, I mean, the language is you know, usually a little less accessible, is a little inaccessible if it's written in kind of scholarly journal language. And the scale of a scholarly journal article doesn't fit the 750 to 1,000 word format of the blog post. What you're really doing at best, our blog posts highlight, you know, one element, one aspect of a larger kind of question about the practice of history, or a larger sort of finding or a larger interpretation. So you could think about it as being a bite-sized kind of chunk of a larger scholarly article. You know, this big article did a lot of things. I want to zero in on this one thing. I want to zero in on this very exciting and generative process of community curation we did as part of, you know, a larger project. And when people try to do more than, you know, offer kind of one or two methodological or theoretical insights in the blog posts, it often gets a little too kind of bogged down. And, you know, we always remind ourselves and remind our authors that people read the blog post, you know, at work. A lot of times people are scanning as practitioners for things that are helpful to them, that are relevant to the specific work they're doing in terms of like tasks or skills, or kind of relevant to the larger kind of theoretical questions they're asking about, you know, race, identity, place, you know, et cetera. And if they're having to wade through a long sort of literary introduction or something like that, or they're not quite sure where the blog post is going, they've just sat down at their office at the museum and they're going to say like, I don't know where she's going with this. I'm going to move on. So we like to get to the point, and we like to tell people very clearly, here's something that I want to tell you. Here's something really exciting that we did with this project about, you know, oral history and, you know, the queer community in, you know, Cairo, Illinois, or something like that. And we did this cool project, and here is one unexpected, you know, outcome that we had. And we want to share this with you and give you a couple examples. Those are the posts that work well. The themes can vary, you know, greatly from kind of nitty-gritty kind of discussions, not too nitty-gritty, but a more nitty-gritty discussion of like, hey, here is this new software platform that can allow you to do cool things with public history students, or cool things at your historical society, and we can do it on the cheap. The folks who created Clio published, you know, have published 2 or 3 such blog posts over the years at Marshall University, saying, hey, here's this cool tool that you can use to make tours with your students, and here's an example of how it works. This is a thing that all public historians could learn about. That's one approach. Then folks, and I'll wrap up here so we can get to more questions, but other folks will you know, pitch something in terms of like, you know, how is the field thinking about gender discrimination and sexual harassment? That is not a nitty-gritty skills post, obviously, but it is a really, it's an acute problem in the field, and it's a urgently needed discussion. And so that post obviously is going to have kind of a different rhythm and do something different. It's going to use a couple of examples, but sort of perhaps talk about how an NCPH committee or a particular institution has developed a set of policies and practices around sexual harassment and discrimination. That goes in a different direction, but for public historians and for NCPH members, that's just as relevant as finding out about Clio, saying, oh, here's what Historical Society X did so that they could not be caught flat-footed when there was some type of predation or abuse like on the job. I can take that with me to my own institution. So I'll leave it there because it looks like we probably have a bunch more questions coming in. Maybe it is pronounced Clio. My pretentious graduate school had a building called Clio Hall, and so that's how they pronounced it. But don't.
They're exhibiting at NCPH 2023, so I will have to ask David in person how it is pronounced. We had a question. I think it was Lori had a question. Do you give assignments for content you would like to have, or are you looking mostly for pitches to be developed into articles? So do you want pitches, or do you want to give people stories to write, basically?
So as I have come to understand it in my very handful of months doing this role, there are typically we field pitches first and that turn into posts. Occasionally there will be a call for a particular kind of post, a category of post, or a topic area, or a kind of poster, somebody who's participating in the conference who's got a particular insight to offer in a particular area. But my sense is that mostly the pitches that come in are the ones are somewhat unsolicited, and I just wanted to add one little note to Richard's point earlier about kind of the compressed space in which you're writing and the need for concision. The one thing that often has to go in the translation from first draft to final post is the beautiful introductory framing, the lead-in, the narrative or anecdotal starting point, because it simply takes too long to get to the chase, right? We need a couple of sentences up front that announce the main idea and get right underway. It doesn't mean that the detail about the project can't come out along the way in the texture of the description of the project, for example, but it's a kind of compressed style of writing that is perhaps less elegant in the narrative sense, but a little more like editorial writing, but that can communicate and maybe a little less nuanced, right? Necessarily, because a little compression has to happen. You can always link to outside pages that describe the project in its entirety, and save yourself the space that would be required to lay out all the facets of a given project, or all of its, its long history, or some kind of backstory, and get right to the heart of the issue at hand that you want to explore.
I think that's right on, Heidi. And I'll also say, in terms of pitches, and we can talk about this pitches in a second, but almost everything we publish, somebody came to us and pitched. As Heidi said, occasionally we do seek people out, but for the most part, because everything is volunteer, history at work works best when people are writing something they want to be working on. Or I should say, wanting to be writing, because everybody's doing a million things, everybody's busy. So if somebody feels like they're kind of writing something to be nice, it's not going to get written, because, you know, we're all busy, and even when we have the best of intentions, we're still always kind of scrambling to get it done. So there are very specific instances where we pitch, for instance, or when we ask for people to write. For instance, we always ask NCPH award winners to write a pitch around the annual meeting, to write a post, not a pitch. Should we talk about pitches, and or do folks have kind of other questions that we haven't covered yet?
I think talking people through the pitch process and what happens next would be a great, because probably that would be my number one question if I didn't see the pitch, you know, come in and watch it happen, is how we go from pitch to post, as they say.
Not pillar to post, right?
Yeah, pitch to post.
That was a really old-fashioned joke that.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, but I caught it. Yeah, so let's move on to pitches. And let me make sure I have the link here. The email address I'm putting in the chat is the sort of just simple over the transom kind of email address to contact us. Transom, God, talk about kind of old-fashioned references. But folks who want to pitch us, we ask for pitches, not entire posts, because again, you know, we're no guarantee we can publish it for numerous reasons, but also, you know, if we have to read a whole post to evaluate whether or not it's a good fit for us, that's more time, and everybody is doing this kind of on their own time as volunteers. So we asked for a pitch that's just a paragraph to explain to us, you know, your topic, the kind of the stakes of the post, why it would be kind of relevant or useful to a broad audience. It doesn't have to hit every part of the public history, kind of the tapestry of public historians, but a kind of a broader applicability is something that we're looking for. And that doesn't, you know, and it can be a post that, again, to use my example of like Cairo, Illinois. I don't know why I'm thinking of that tonight, but you know, where you're like, oh, well, that's a very specific example. If you were doing a oral history project in this, Southern Illinois town, and you had this, methodological insight, well, like, what the hell does that mean to me in kind of metropolitan, New York? But it could be that there is a, what is applicable is the way you used a smartphone app to kind of create a walking tour in your Southern Illinois town, and that smartphone app, that technology, somebody in Brooklyn or Westchester County in New York could also use that technology, and so like that's the piece they take. So we're not looking for like universality in the posts, but we really like it if it's a post that somebody can read and say, like, I don't do military history, I'm not interested in military history, but boy, your kind of post about what it's like to be at a military history site and navigating relationships between tour guides and audiences, that really made me think, and I can apply that in my radically different historical site. So we ask for one paragraph that just says, what the topic is, what are the one or two big takeaways from the post, and sort of, perhaps one example that you'll include in the post to sort of make your argument vivid. And then in terms of the editorial process, if we move forward with the post, if we're able to, find space for it on the calendar, the editorial team at History at Work will assign the post to one lead editor, as we call them, and one affiliate editor. We should have had, here's where I should have made a slide. We have a pyramid of editors. There's two kind of lead editors. They're not more powerful, but they're just, their job is to kind of be thinking about the kind of the overall flow of the posts. Every blog is given to an affiliate editor who works with you very directly on a couple of drafts. Gets your draft, says, yes, we like we like your pitch. Perhaps we will make a couple of suggestions on your pitch when we email you back to say, yes, please send us a draft by, date X. And we might say, here's the thing that really grabbed us about your pitch. And we would really like you to, if you could, you mentioned 3 different kind of theoretical kind of takeaways from your kind of unique project, bringing together religious history and history of sexuality, what have you. Really, could you just focus on one? And here's, we think this one kind of big kind of theoretical takeaway you had about your project, we think that would be great. So if you could, we think you should just focus on one of those big takeaways. And then, you write your draft, and then you and the affiliate editor will be in conversation via email, going through at least 2 drafts. You'll submit a draft to your affiliate editor. The affiliate editor and the lead editor will kind of look at it together, give you some, a few sort of more general notes. We don't line edit on the first draft unless it's something like kind of really, really pressing. But normally, the first draft, we say, hey, this is in pretty good shape. We actually think, your nut graph, your thesis statement is kind of down here. Can you move this to the top? And probably all of this needs to go for word count. And can you hyperlink to that? You do a great job of describing the nitty gritty of how you did this exhibition, but a lot of this kind of has to go. Is there a way that you can link to a part of your institution's website? And then you take that back, you do a second draft, everything usually goes well, and we've got a post that is ready to go. We ask you also, if you have an image, to send us an image that you'd like to include, and provide us the caption and the photography credit, or the credit for the image. And then the post goes to one of the 2 copy editors, myself or Medupe Labode, and we check we do all the copy editing, make sure the links actually work. We make sure it's in our house style, which is not a super aggressive, we're not like, it's not AP style. We're not too persnickety, but we want it, we want everything to be consistent and to look nice, because it's sort of one of the kind of the front doors to the NCPH. And then the post goes live, and you've got another link for your CV. That's the simplest description of the way the editorial process goes over what's usually about for maybe 3 weeks to a month from the time you submit a draft to the time that it's published, posted live on the blog. Although, we are willing to look at kind of time-sensitive posts. That happens particularly if there's a breaking event. There were a lot of those during the Trump years, and stuff that people wanted to get out immediately, or something that kind of came up at the last minute. So we do those sort of very sort of last minute posts, but it's roughly usually kind of a month time frame. Heidi, do you have things to add to that? You might actually have maybe even a clearer perception of how things actually go, since it's newer to you, so you probably notice some things that I have forgotten.
Well, I was just gonna, in terms of the move from pitch to final draft, I was just gonna add that, there are refinements that happen at different phases of that process. Some have to do with scope and framing and focus, and often that can be worked out before your first draft emerges, because the pitch kind of surfaces the the challenge of scope or the question about a focal point, and we would highlight that for you before you even start drafting. And so often the drafting feedback is, once we see a draft, is focused more on, I won't say stylistics, although that can sometimes come up, but more like, clarity, whether you need a little more information about something or a little less information about something, whether you've supported a main idea with real evidence, or whether it's just a kind of assertion that, hangs out there without being supported. And I guess the other thing is often those drafts are a little bit long, and they have to be sort of streamlined. And so helping you to figure out how to do that kind of work through suggestions, questions, more than line edits, kind of the feedback that allows you to make decisions about how to tighten and refine in ways that really suit the goals of the post. So from where I sit, just as a longtime teacher of writing, it's this fabulous opportunity to practice, as Richard said, a particular kind of writing that you don't often get asked to do in the classroom or in other kind of common situations, to be audacious about your ideas and your assertions, and as long as you have support for them, and to do the work, importantly, the work of translation. So how do your experiences, your perceptions, your observations in your localized context translate to a broader community of public historians and institutional practices, right? How can you make yourself intelligible to this wide and diverse audience, which is sort of like writing for the New York Times, right? I'm not to be too, glib about it. This is not the New York Times in any sense. It's certainly not that competitive, but it's a similar kind of, experience in terms of translation work. And it is hugely helpful when moving into the professional sphere. And just to address Christy's question really quickly, I'll try to answer it. How is it different from writing for an institutional publication of your, locally or some more specialized context? I think it's exactly the translation work that I was just describing, right? It's to cast your ideas, your insights for a much wider audience, using maybe more generalized language, doing the explaining, but it's not a specialist's readership per se. It not to say there aren't specialists who will read it, but you're trying to be intelligible to a wide range of practitioners, and without the institution-specific orientation that might come with a collections blog or something like that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, that was actually a great question, because those being able to write, I think though they're very related forms, like the writing for, obviously for like a collections blog, writing for your museum's blog. They're very similar, in tone and style and probably length. And I would say that this is very good practice, particularly for graduate students, to feel comfortable starting to kind of write at this length and in this tone and style. The only difference being that the component of these posts where we take one step beyond saying, look at what, our museum is doing this amazing stuff with these old photos, and God, we really want you to come to the museum and check out the exhibition. We want to kind of add just another piece, which is to kind of that reflexive component to the post that says, and you in another context, again, I keep harping back to this in another context, but you as a public history instructor, or as a curator, or as the ED of a small historical society, or as an employee of a state agency, there is something that you can take from our cool thing we did and apply it. But I do think that learning to write like this, and not learning, I mean, we're not, that sounds like we're giving a gift to people by letting them publish, but by getting comfortable publishing in this kind of blog format, it pays, I think, dividends professionally. I'm having a lot of my friends visit a undergraduate internship course I'm teaching this spring. Our department makes you kind of convene the students once a week while they're doing their internships, just to kind of talk about what they're learning, etc. And I wasn't kind of like sure what to actually do with them in class and for these once weekly meetings, because they're doing an internship. That's their main thing. So what I decided to do was devote 5 or 6 of the classes to having local folks and friends of mine Zoom in with us and just talk about how they got to the jobs they have. People who either work in public history or have a history degree and do something in like legal aid or a related field, and talk about how they got from where they were with their bachelor's degree in history to like their job that they have. I bring this up because several people, in talking about making the leap from academia to public history, or just from not even a PhD program, but like what they had to prove when they started working in legal aid or a museum, was that they could write for a general audience in a real bite-sized chunk, not in the kind of the labored, inaccessible academic prose. And I think the blog does that. And I think one sign that History at Work does a pretty good job at doing that is because so many public history syllabi include pieces from History at Work. The first time I was teaching public history, especially to undergraduates, assigned some pretty kind of like kind of higher level theoretical pieces that just went over like a lead balloon. And I realized that the History at Work posts were just the right length and just the right kind of level of complexity, because it was, we emphasized, just, a topic and 1 or 2 takeaways, that they are very useful as sort of jump starts to conversations with undergrads. It looks like we have a couple of new questions.
So Michelle asks, what is the size of NCPH's blog audience? How much traffic and attention does it get? Do other related blogs link to it, or vice versa?
Oh man.
This is something Nicole would probably have known. Unfortunately, our digital media editor departed last month.
While we're talking here, I can see if I can pull up the most recent statistics. We don't get linked to from other blogs so often. The acceptance rate, I'd say pretty high. Like, I'm not even like more. God, I would say like 8 out of 10 pitches we accept. Like, we really try to work with people to get you a pitch and an idea that can work. Like, we take seriously the kind of the small d democratic nature of the NCPH and the blog. We want to find a way to say yes. And that, when Michael and Heidi and I were talking a couple of weeks ago just about what we were going to do tonight, that was one of the things we really wanted to emphasize. It's sort of the opposite of this, the peer-reviewed journal, where we're, sometimes it feels like they're, trying to come up with a reason to say no, and whatever, peer review is what it is. But we try to say yes. We work with folks to kind of get their idea to a scale or to a kind of a structure that will work. And sometimes when we say no, what we say, to this question earlier about TPH, sometimes we say like, this is really a public historian, the public historian pitch. This is, you can't do this at a blog post scale. You should really reach out to the folks at the Public Historian. That we do. So we, frequently when we say for, whatever reason, that this isn't a good fit, we often suggest an alternate forum for the potential forum for the post.
And I don't have numbers in front of me either, but I can say pretty confidently that I think History at Work is our second highest traffic page on the NCPH website, the first being our jobs page, which blows everything else out of the water, right? But History at Work is a second. And then also our History at Work posts that feature in Twitter posts are often our sort of most successful Twitter sort of engagement. So some more anecdotal than data-driven answer there.
One other way in which this is very different from a peer-reviewed journal is that it, in the vein of Richard's point about wanting to say yes, that often when we come back with a slightly hesitant response to a pitch, it is written in a sort of how about this instead, or not suggesting an entirely different kind of post necessarily, or an entirely different topic, but a different way of framing, a more bite-sized approach, or treatment of the material. And it's usually pretty clear in the back and forth at that phase of whether something can be tailored in that way, and whether it makes sense to do it. And so it is sort of it sounds sort of lame to put it this way, but it's like a learning experience from the get-go. And this is quite different from a peer-reviewed journal, where not only are they often looking for ways to say no, but there's a sort of threshold. Does your pitch meet the goals of this publication as we have framed them for you? No, it doesn't. Okay, see you later. And there's not a lot of back and forth at that point. And there can be back and forth with a pitch in this case. So it's more uplifting generally, I think.
And sometimes when we've passed on stuff, it's because in a couple of instances we had a backlog of things that needed to get out, and folks came to us with having already published a couple times recently. And it's not that we don't want to publish somebody several times in a year, but there have been times where we were just at capacity because, again, we all volunteer, and we had to say, hey, if it's between an MA student at Duquesne or Temple who has an idea, and we want to devote some time to kind of supporting them in getting that idea live as a post, and somebody else who's already published a couple of things, we say, like, can you come back to us in a while. We've also said no recently to multi-part posts. That had gotten increasingly popular over the last few years. A lot of folks were coming to us and said, we would like to do a 5-part series on different aspects of this project we did about civil rights in our town. The theme is important, probably the project is good, but we were getting a lot of multi-part posts, and that is a lot of material for us to be shepherding from pitch to post and getting over the finish line, and it was really bogging us down. And so we reserve the right to still accept posts in very multi-part posts in very rare instances. We have one coming up soon, but we've started kind of lovingly telling people that, like, if you might think this needs 3 posts, but it really could it can be one post. And that, like, we're willing to be kind of sticks in the mud about, because it kind of concentrates the author's mind, and it lets us not, you know, pull our hair out metaphorically in some of our cases. So that we are willing to say no about. Yeah, Michael.
Michael.
I did want to just, alert us. So, our goal is to respect your time. And so we are about 9 minutes before the hour. And so you get your questions in, and just wanted to note that.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could maybe talk to a few of the, not mistakes exactly, but like the most common challenges or pitfalls you see either in pitches or in the like process of pitch to post, just so that we can kind of nip those in the bud, before they get to your hands. I can think of one, which is photos.
Well, what about photos, Megan?
Images, asking people to provide images and captions. Like, I feel like that is something a lot of people are not familiar with doing. And I know this because it was something I wasn't used to doing when I wrote a history at work post. And I remember Nicole walking me through that. So I just wondered if there's other little things like that that people might want to be aware of before they kind of pitch.
Yeah. So you mean common challenges before something becomes a full-blown draft, you mean?
Either mistakes in the pitching process that raise red flags, or things that slow down the editorial process on both sides, that people might think about now.
Well, I think that one common challenge that I see in both pitch and draft versions is too much detail, right? Just trying to say too many things, trying to layer in too many complex sort of descriptive elements, or trying to deal with too many facets of a given project or issue, and being indecisive about which ones matter the most, and so trying to layer in a bunch of them, right, before getting to the main idea. That can be a challenge of indecision, right? Not being decisive about what matters most or what the main idea is. It could be not being certain about which details matter most for the audience. What do they need to know, and what can just kind of be communicated another way. But it can be, fuzziness of other kinds too. I think that's a pretty common challenge, and we sometimes see it in the pitch, right? The pitch itself is kind of sprawling and uncertain about what its what the main point is.
Yeah, if a pitch is like 300 words, we get nervous because the post is supposed to be like 750. So you've like written half a pitch, or you've written half a post already. And I say that with deep empathy, having just pitched a lefty journal with like a short magazine piece, and having never pitched that kind of publication, I felt like I sent a pitch that was longer than it needed to be, but I wasn't exactly sure what they needed, and my contact there wasn't very clear. Just said like, yeah, write 2 paragraphs to do this and this. So, we don't like reject somebody's pitch because it's long, but, I will, because I'm the copy editor, so I have to go over every word. So I get like really uptight about the length, but I'll often say like, hey, no, this seems really good. Like, we should definitely move forward with this, but tell them that like the pitch is 3/4 of the length of what they need to do. So like, just, and remind them, affiliate editor, that we're serious about the word count. So, we a mismatch between, the scale of the idea and the size of space available is another common sort of challenge.
Or a mismatch between the scale of, or the character of the main idea and the the evidence being supplied, right? That there's too much of it, or there's, you know, the translation between them is taking too long. And I think, you know, a few bits of evidence description can be delivered efficiently, or you can't often supply 8 or 10 kinds of evidence of some kind of some issue.
And I think something else that trips people up a lot is, and this is, everybody jokes with me in our editorial meetings because it's my hobby horse, not getting to the point quickly. This is super important for a blog post because our homepage for the blog has little kind of capsule kind of you know, we show you like the first couple lines of the post and then have a read more link, and then you click on it and take you to the full post. If you haven't stated what the pitch is, what the post is about in the first 3 sentences, then you've got very little incentive for the person to click yes. I just threw out what I think is a very good example of a post that was super short. I mean, I edited it. That's not why I think it's good, but I just happen to remember it, know it, and my friend is the author of the post, and she was somebody who had moved from academia to museums and had gotten used to writing on her institution's blog page, and just wrote this, what we call a project showcase, which is a super short, you know, post, you know, 300 to 500 words that just essentially says, we did something and we're proud of it. Here's just 1 or 2 paragraphs, you know, 1 or 2 paragraphs telling you what it is, but follow this link to read, you know, if you want to know more. But we are continually telling folks, like, by the second line, you have to say, you know, the Chicago History Museum will be exploring these questions through Exhibit X, you know, opening next week. Like, you have to like tell them what it's about super high. So we are constantly saying, this is good, move it up, move it up, move it up, move it up, take out all this other stuff. And so I'm thinking of the one parallel might be, you know, a lot of us are going to go to the NCPH conference in Atlanta next month. We're going to sit through a lot of sessions. Some of them are going to be a very kind of formal sort of conference paper mode. And I feel like I'm a smart person. I completely zone out if somebody is reading a paper, even if it's a topic I'm super interested in. When somebody comes to one of those sessions and just says, and thank you. Yes, Megan. Yeah, very few papers. That's great. But you know, when you're at a conference and somebody just says, hi, everybody, I know we just flew in, we're all exhausted, and here's what I want to talk about. I am looking at, you know, the history of clergy and anti-war activism during the Vietnam War era. I'm going to tell you 3 things. I go, okay, thank God, that I can take with me. I can get something out of this. I can remember what you're doing with your scholarship. The blog should do the same thing, because again, I think if it doesn't, people are just are gonna keep scrolling because they're at the historic site and they're you know, doing a million things at once. But I think
well, we're right at that time, and I mean, I'm okay if folks really want to stay and ask a few more questions, but we should also, you know, recognize if you want to close out, you can. So how about this is, you know, I'll thank our speakers, Richard and Heidi, for coming in and spending their time sharing. And this is recorded, so it'll be valuable for the long term. Thank you, Megan, for your technical ability and your facilitation. I really appreciate it. So with that, is there interest in following up with more questions? Well, you have Heidi and Richard available for you.
I could take a couple more minutes if folks have additional questions.
And if anyone has questions that occur to them later, you can always email us, ncph@iupui.edu. We'll happily send you along to the editorial team I'll stick the email in the chat, just in case you want to follow up about any questions as you mull over your post.
Oh, there was a Christy.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say thanks. And also I was just skimming that example that you gave. And I think I can see, like, it has those zinger sentences at the beginning, but then also the ending paragraph talks about the sort of broader relevance in history of science and technology. And we go from like what you think computer games are and that they're different from the board games to these similarities. I mean, I have to dig into it a little more, but I think I get why you're pulling that example out. And actually it's really helpful because we've been collecting environmental board games, and now I need to go out to New Jersey to see that exhibit.
Yeah, it's that was really cool, simply because it was also like we don't get as much sciencey technology stuff. You know, we tend to be a very sort of history and more, you know, social history. I think there's probably social history is more well represented in the NCPH than, you know, like maybe like history of science museums and stuff like that. So when my friend Flory wanted to write about this, I'd been bugging her to write about this something there for a while, simply because you know, it's really cool to kind of think about kind of how an exhibit can kind of be fun, but also challenge you know, what you think you know about games. And so, yeah, like to your point about like at the end, like, you know, yeah, she still kind of flexes those more sort of like scholarly analytical muscles like in the last couple of paragraphs, and does get a chance to say like, I want to go a little deeper here, but just for a second, to tell you like why it's super cool. And if this was a book, I'd write 300 pages about how we need to you know, we need to rethink the category of play. But she does get that in, but it's a tight 500 words or something. But it has the desired effect of kind of letting people know that the Sarnoff Museum in Ewing, New Jersey exists, and that, you know, science museums do cool stuff, you know.
And it has the other, you know, another feature which I just want to praise, which is that it delivers, you know, specialized information in a totally, you know, accessible way. There's no language in here that would confuse anybody. And, you know, even, you know, the history of play, for example, is a sort of a thing. It's a phrase. It has its own weight in a certain corner of public history or of cultural history, but she doesn't wield it, you know, as a specialized term or phrase. She just invites everybody in to understand and access that idea by using it, right? And I think that's a kind of key feature of a lot of these posts. It's inclusive rather than exclusive in terms of its specialized language, if its use of language. Yeah. Right, exactly. Were there other questions, or was, I guess these were just general comments at the end here. You guys are so appreciative. Thank you.
Well, this may be a good way to wrap up. I do want to encourage you so you can go in and use the chat. I will leave this meeting open for another minute if you need to find the 3 dots on saving the chat, because there's a lot of great links and resources in the chat. So with that, thank you very much for our speakers, and thank you for listening in.
Yeah,
Take
thanks
care.
for having us.
See
We look forward to receiving your pitches.
y'all.
Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye.